I'm Nicole Williams, 42, and I worked my way up from a small-town kid to a senior master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. For years, I bent over backwards for my husband, kids, and extended family, switching shifts, driving hours, even burning leave days to be there for their milestones. But on the morning of my promotion ceremony, not one of them showed up. They all went to my brother's party instead. That was the moment I decided things would never be the same. Have you ever been overlooked or betrayed by the very people you've always shown up for? If so, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being let down, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries, respect, and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. I learned early that family meant showing up. My parents never missed a school play, never forgot a birthday, never let work keep them from what mattered. When my little brother scraped his knee, we all gathered around. When I made honor roll, the whole family celebrated. It wasn't complicated. You showed up for the people you loved, period. I carried that into my marriage with David and later with our kids, Emma and Jake. Even when I enlisted in the Air Force and duty called at odd hours, I found ways to make it work. I'd switch shifts with other airmen to attend Emma's soccer games. I'd drive 3 hours after a training exercise to make Jake's school concert. When David got passed over for a promotion at his accounting firm, I took extra shifts to help with the mortgage. When my brother Mark needed help moving across state lines, I used my leave days. The balance was never perfect, but I told myself that's how families worked. Someone had to be the reliable one, the glue that held everything together. I didn't mind being that person. Actually, I took pride in it. My commanding officers noticed my dedication, my ability to juggle military responsibilities with family commitments. My fellow airmen came to me for advice on managing deployments with kids at home. I had it figured out, or so I thought. Mark was always the charismatic one, the brother who could charm his way out of trouble and into opportunity. Where I was steady and methodical, he was spontaneous and magnetic. People gravitated toward him at family gatherings. He had big dreams and bigger stories, always on the verge of his next breakthrough. David admired that about him, said Mark had vision while I had discipline. It wasn't meant as a slight, but it stung a little. Over the years, I found myself covering for Mark more often than I'd planned. When he needed startup capital for various ventures, I'd contribute what I could from my military salary. When he needed someone to watch his dog for a weekend getaway, I'd rearrange my schedule. When he needed emotional support after his divorce, I'd listen for hours on the phone, offering advice and encouragement. David supported these gestures, said it was good to see siblings looking out for each other. My kids loved Uncle Mark. He was the fun one who brought expensive gifts and told wild stories about his adventures. He'd take them to concerts I couldn't afford, introduce them to his trendy friends, make them feel like they were part of something exciting. I was glad they had that relationship, even if it sometimes made my own role feel mundane by comparison. I was the one who helped with homework, enforced curfews, attended parent-teacher conferences. Mark was the one who made life feel like an adventure. The Air Force became my anchor in all this. My career progression was steady, my performance reviews consistently excellent. I took pride in my service, in the respect I'd earned from my peers and superiors. The military valued competence and reliability, qualities I'd always possessed, but that sometimes went unnoticed at home. When I got word about my promotion to senior master sergeant, it felt like validation of 15 years of hard work and sacrifice. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday morning in late spring. It wasn't a massive affair, but it meant everything to me. The base chapel would be filled with fellow airmen, commanding officers, and families. I'd imagine David sitting in the front row, maybe looking a little emotional as they pinned the new stripes on my uniform. Emma and Jake would see their mother recognized for her service, understand that their sacrifices, all those evenings I worked late, all those weekends I was at training, had led to something meaningful. I sent the details to everyone 6 weeks in advance. I marked it on the family calendar in red ink. I mentioned it at Sunday dinners, during phone calls, in text messages. David said he'd already requested the day off work. Emma promised to skip her morning classes. Jake said he'd driven his friends to see his mom get promoted. Mark said he wouldn't miss it for the world. But life has a way of testing the things we take for granted. 3 weeks before my ceremony, Mark announced his plans for a grand opening party for his latest venture, a craft cocktail lounge in the downtown arts district. He'd been working on it for months, he said, pouring his heart and savings into creating something special. The opening was scheduled for the same weekend as my promotion, Saturday night. "It's perfect timing," he said during a family barbecue. "Everyone can come to Nicole's thing Friday morning, then we'll have the whole weekend to celebrate my new place." I felt a slight chill, though I couldn't articulate why. It was perfectly reasonable. There was no conflict. We could do both. But over the following weeks, I noticed the family's energy shifting. Conversations that used to center on my upcoming ceremony now revolved around Mark's party. David spent evenings helping Mark design promotional materials. Emma and Jake talked excitedly about meeting Mark's business partners, about how cool the lounge was going to be. When I brought up my promotion, the responses became perfunctory, distracted. "That's great, Mom," Jake would say, already turning back to his phone. "We'll all be there," David would assure me, but his attention was clearly elsewhere. Mark's party grew from a simple opening into a major event. He hired a DJ, arranged for food trucks, invited local influencers and business leaders. The family threw themselves into helping with preparations. Even my parents drove down from Michigan to assist with setup. I found myself oddly on the periphery of all this activity, watching my family rally around Mark's dream while mine felt increasingly forgotten. 2 weeks before my ceremony, I asked David directly if he'd arranged for time off work. "Of course," he said, "though I might need to duck out early to help Mark with some last-minute details for Saturday." I felt that chill again, stronger this time. "My ceremony starts at 10 and should be done by noon. You'll have plenty of time for Mark stuff." "Right, absolutely. I just want to make sure everything goes smoothly for him. This is a big deal, Nicole. This could really change his life." I wanted to point out that my promotion was also a big deal, that it had already changed my life in ways both large and small. But something held me back. Maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe 15 years of putting family first had earned me the right to expect they'd show up for one morning when it mattered most to me. A few months before my promotion ceremony, I started noticing small but telling changes in how my family responded to me. The shift was subtle at first, like a radio station gradually losing signal. David, who used to ask detailed questions about my work, began offering distracted nods when I talked about training exercises or upcoming evaluations. Emma and Jake, once eager to hear stories from the base, seemed more interested in their phones when I got home from duty. At first, I attributed it to normal life rhythms. David was busy at work, dealing with a difficult client and approaching year-end deadlines. The kids were teenagers, naturally growing more independent and focused on their own social circles. But as weeks passed, I realized their attention wasn't just drifting, it was actively redirecting toward Mark and his latest venture. Mark had always been a dreamer, cycling through ambitious projects that captured his imagination for months before fizzling out. There was the food truck phase, the real estate investment scheme, the attempt to start a local magazine. Each time, he'd approach these ventures with infectious enthusiasm, drawing family members into his orbit of possibility and excitement. This time felt different, though. The cocktail lounge wasn't just another pipe dream. He'd secured legitimate financing, found a prime location, hired actual employees. David became increasingly invested in Mark's success. He'd spend evenings after work creating spreadsheets to help Mark track inventory costs, designing social media graphics, researching permit requirements. "Your brother's really onto something this time," he'd tell me, looking up from his laptop with the kind of excitement I rarely saw anymore when we discussed my own career. Emma and Jake were equally captivated. Mark had a way of making teenagers feel sophisticated and included. He'd take them to scout locations, ask their opinions on music and decor, promise them jobs at the lounge once they turned 18. "Uncle Mark said I could be a hostess," Emma told her friends, beaming with pride. "He said I have the right personality for hospitality." I should have been happy for Mark. After years of false starts and disappointments, he was finally building something substantial. But watching my family pour their energy into his dream while mine seemed to fade into background noise left me feeling strangely isolated in my own home. The promotion to senior master sergeant represented the culmination of everything I'd worked toward since enlisting. It wasn't just a career milestone, it was validation of the sacrifices I'd made, the balance I'd maintained, the competence I'd demonstrated under pressure. I'd earned this recognition through years of excellence in training, leadership during challenging assignments, and consistent performance that earned respect from both subordinates and superiors. When I first mentioned the ceremony date, everyone responded with appropriate enthusiasm. David marked it in his calendar immediately. Emma said she'd already planned to skip her Friday morning psychology class. Jake promised to be there, even though it meant missing his usual gaming session with friends. Mark said wild horses couldn't keep him away from watching his sister get promoted. But as Mark's grand opening approached, I noticed their responses to reminders about my ceremony becoming increasingly vague and distracted. When I mentioned picking up their guest passes for the base, David said, "Right, yes, I need to check on something with work." When I asked Emma what she planned to wear, she said, "Oh, I'll figure something out," without looking up from her phone. The contrast with their preparation for Mark's party was stark. David had bought a new shirt specifically for the occasion. Emma had gone shopping with her aunt to find the perfect outfit. Jake had gotten a haircut and asked to borrow David's good watch. They discussed the party constantly, who would be there, what the space looked like, how proud they were of Mark for bringing his vision to life. 3 days before my ceremony, I tried to address my growing unease directly. "I know everyone's excited about Mark's opening," I said during dinner, "but I want to make sure we're all still clear about Friday morning. It starts at 10 sharp, and base security requires everyone to be there by 9:30. "Absolutely," David said. "We'll all be there. I might need to leave a little early," he added after a pause. "Mark wants to do a final walkthrough of the space before the party, and I promised I'd help him move some furniture." "The ceremony should be over by noon," I said carefully. "You'll have the entire afternoon. Right, but you know how these things run long sometimes. And Mark's really nervous about everything being perfect." I felt something shift inside me, a recognition I didn't want to acknowledge. "Mark's party is Saturday night, David. My ceremony is Friday morning. There's no conflict." "Of course not. I'm just saying I want to be available for him if he needs help with last-minute details." Emma chimed in. "Uncle Mark said we could come early on Saturday to see the space before everyone else arrives. He's going to give us a private tour." "That sounds nice," I managed. "As long as it doesn't interfere with Friday." But even as I said the words, I had a sinking feeling that Friday morning was already becoming secondary to Saturday night in their minds. The signs were there, the distracted responses, the qualified commitments, the way conversations about my ceremony were quickly redirected to discussions of Mark's party. 2 nights before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to David, listening to him breathe, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. These were the people who loved me most in the world. They'd been there for everything else that mattered. They wouldn't let me down now, not for something this important. But doubt had taken root, and it grew stronger with each passing hour. The morning of my promotion ceremony arrived with the kind of crisp spring weather that made everything feel possible. I woke early, as I always did before important events, and spent extra time on my uniform. The dress blues had to be perfect, every crease sharp, every button polished, every insignia positioned exactly according to regulation. I'd been through this ritual many times, but today felt different. Today, I would put on senior master sergeant stripes for the first time. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I practiced the smile I'd wear during the ceremony. Confident but humble, proud but professional. I thought about the moment they'd call my name, the feeling of having new rank insignia pinned to my uniform, the photographs afterward with my family gathered around me. This was what I'd worked toward for 15 years, not just the promotion itself, but the recognition it represented, the validation that my service mattered. David was still sleeping when I finished getting ready. I'd planned to wake him by 7:30, giving him plenty of time to shower and dress before we needed to leave for the base. Emma and Jake could sleep a little longer, Teenagers needed more rest, and the ceremony wasn't until 10. At 7:30, I gently shook David's shoulder. "Time to get up," I said softly. "Big day today." He opened his eyes slowly, looking confused for a moment before recognition dawned. "Right," he said. "Your promotion thing." Something about the way he said "thing" made my chest tighten, but I pushed the feeling away. He was just groggy. Everyone was awkward when they first woke up. "I'll start breakfast," I said. "Wake up the kids in 15 minutes?" By 8 o'clock, I had coffee ready and eggs cooking on the stove. David appeared in the kitchen, hair still messy, wearing the same clothes he'd slept in. "You might want a shower," I suggested. "We need to leave here by 9 to make it through base security on time." He looked at me blankly for a moment. "Leave? For my ceremony?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Oh, right. About that, Mark called last night after you went to bed. He's having some kind of crisis with the liquor delivery for tonight. I told him I'd come over first thing this morning to help sort it out." I felt the world tilt slightly. "David, my promotion ceremony is in 2 hours. I know. I'll try to make it. But this is really important to Mark. He's been planning this for months. I've been planning this for 15 years. The words hung in the air between us. David looked uncomfortable but not apologetic. "Look, can't someone else from your unit record it or something? I promise I'll watch it later." I stared at my husband, this man I'd been married to for 18 years, and felt something fundamental crack inside me. "You're not coming." It wasn't a question. "I'll try," he said again, but we both knew what that meant. I walked upstairs to wake Emma and Jake, moving on autopilot. Emma's room first, her teenage sanctuary of posters and textbooks and clothes draped over every surface. Time to get up. We need to leave for the base in an hour." She groaned and pulled a pillow over her head. 5 more minutes. "Emma, my ceremony. Today. Remember?" She peeked out from under the pillow. "Oh, Mom, I'm really tired. And I have that study group later for my psych exam. Can I skip this one?" "I'll make it up to you, I promise." The crack inside me widened. This is my promotion ceremony. We talked about this weeks ago. I know, and I'm really proud of you. But Uncle Mark wants us all to help with setup this afternoon, and I promised I'd be there. I stood in her doorway, still in my perfect dress blues, and felt the last piece of my certainty crumble. "Fine." Jake's response was more direct. "Sorry, Mom. Already made plans with Uncle Mark. This is kind of a big deal for him." I found myself standing alone in the hallway of my own house, wearing my dress uniform, preparing to receive one of the most significant honors of my career, with no one to witness it except strangers and colleagues. The drive to the base passed in a blur. I called my parents, thinking maybe they could make the 4-hour drive, but they were already committed to helping Mark with party preparations. My sister lived across the country. My few close friends were either deployed or stationed elsewhere. I would walk across that stage alone, accept my promotion alone, celebrate this moment alone. As I parked at the base and walked toward the ceremony venue, I made a decision. I would not let their absence diminish this achievement. I had earned this recognition through my own hard work and dedication. The ceremony would proceed, with or without my family's support. But as I took my place among the other promotes, scanning the small crowd of attendees one last time for a familiar face that wasn't there, I felt something inside me permanently shift. The family I'd spent 18 years prioritizing had chosen to prioritize someone else on the one day I'd asked them to prioritize me. The ceremony began, and I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and smiled for the cameras. But inside, I was already planning what would come next. The ceremony itself was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd hoped. When they called my name, I walked across the small stage with my head high, accepting congratulations from my commanding officer and feeling the weight of new stripes being pinned to my uniform. My fellow airmen applauded enthusiastically. Colleagues I'd served with for years beamed with genuine pride. The base photographer captured the moment with professional precision. But when I looked out at the small audience of family members and friends, I saw only empty chairs where my husband and children should have been sitting. Other promotes had their loved ones there, Spouses wiping away proud tears, children fidgeting in their best clothes, parents beaming with obvious joy. I had a row of vacant seats that might as well have been a billboard advertising my family's priorities. After the formal portion ended, people milled around taking photographs and sharing congratulations. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a colleague I'd worked with on several joint training exercises, approached me with his wife and teenage son in tow. "Congratulations, Nicole," he said, extending his hand. "Well deserved." His wife smiled warmly. "We're so proud of you. Carlos talks about your leadership all the time." Their son, probably Jake's age, looked slightly bored but polite. A normal teenager doing normal teenager things, like showing up for his parents' important moment even if he'd rather be somewhere else. "Thank you," I managed. "That means a lot. Where's your family?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, glancing around. Carlos said they'd definitely be here. The question hit like a physical blow. I'd been dreading it, knowing someone would ask, knowing I'd have to explain or deflect or find some way to save face while the humiliation burned in my chest. "They couldn't make it," I said simply. "Prior commitment." The Rodriguez family exchanged a quick look, the kind of glance that passes between people who recognize social awkwardness, but are too polite to probe further. "Well, we're here celebrating you," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "This is a big achievement." I posed for photos with colleagues, accepted handshakes from officers I'd served under, made small talk about new responsibilities and future assignments. Everyone was gracious and professional. Several people mentioned what a milestone this promotion represented, how proud my family must be, how much this recognition meant for my career trajectory. Each comment was a small knife twist, highlighting the absence that seemed to grow larger with every passing minute. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, my squadron commander, pulled me aside as the crowd began to thin. "Outstanding work, Sergeant Williams," she said. "You've earned this promotion through consistent excellence and strong leadership. I know your family must be incredibly proud." I nodded, unable to trust my voice for a moment. Colonel Hayes had daughters of her own, teenagers who sometimes complained about military life, but who always showed up when their mother needed them to. She understood the balance required to succeed in the Air Force while maintaining a family. "They are," I said finally, the lie sitting heavy in my mouth. By 11:30, most people had filtered out to return to their duties or weekend plans. I walked slowly to my car, still in full dress uniform, carrying a small bouquet someone had given me and a certificate of promotion that felt simultaneously meaningful and hollow. Sitting in the driver's seat, I pulled out my phone to check messages, hoping against logic that maybe David had texted to explain, that maybe the kids had sent congratulations, that maybe someone in my family had remembered what today meant to me. Instead, I found 3 messages from Mark asking if David was on his way to help with liquor delivery, 2 from Emma about what time to arrive for party setup, and 1 from Jake asking if he could borrow my car later to get to Mark's opening. Nothing about my promotion. Nothing acknowledging what I'd just accomplished. Nothing recognizing that this morning had been important to me. I scrolled through social media and saw photos from Mark's party preparations. David carrying boxes into the lounge, looking cheerful and engaged. Emma and Jake arranging decorations, laughing at something Mark was saying. My parents unpacking catering supplies with big smiles. My entire family working together to support Mark's dream while I sat alone in a base parking lot, still wearing the uniform that represented 15 years of service they couldn't be bothered to witness being honored. The contrast was devastating. Not just the absence of their physical presence, but the enthusiasm they showed for Mark's endeavor compared to the perfunctory acknowledgement of mine. They hadn't just failed to show up, they'd actively chosen to invest their time and energy elsewhere. I started the car and drove home, still wearing my dress blues, thinking about the conversation I knew was coming. Because this wouldn't slide by unaddressed. This wouldn't be something I swallowed and moved past for the sake of family harmony. For the first time in our marriage, David was going to have to explain himself. And for the first time in my adult life, I was going to stop putting everyone else's needs before my own. The house was empty when I arrived, which somehow made everything worse. Not just empty, clearly abandoned in haste, with coffee cups left on the counter, breakfast dishes in the sink, Emma's textbooks scattered across the dining room table, where she'd apparently been studying before deciding my ceremony wasn't worth her time. I walked through the room slowly, still in my dress uniform, seeing my home with different eyes. The family photos on the mantel told the story of 18 years together: vacations, holidays, graduations, celebrations. In most of them, I was present but somehow peripheral, the reliable one behind the camera or standing slightly apart from the central action. When had I become so easy to overlook? I changed out of my uniform carefully, hanging it in the closet with the same precision I'd used getting dressed that morning. The new stripes caught the light differently than the old ones had. I'd worked for these stripes through deployments and training exercises, through performance evaluations and leadership challenges, through the delicate balance of military duty and family responsibility. They represented something I'd earned entirely on my own merit. But wearing them felt hollow when there was no one to share the achievement with. By 2 o'clock, I still hadn't heard from anyone. I made myself a sandwich, ate it standing at the kitchen counter, and tried to decide what came next. I could drive to Mark's lounge, show up in civilian clothes, pretend nothing had happened, slip back into my role as the supportive sister and accommodating wife. I could let this pass like I'd let so many other small disappointments pass over the years. Or I could acknowledge that something fundamental had changed this morning, something that couldn't be unchanged by pretending it hadn't happened. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "How did the ceremony go?" "Sorry we couldn't make it. Mark's crisis ended up being bigger than expected. Save us some cake." I stared at the message for a long time. Save us some cake. As if my promotion ceremony was a birthday party, a casual event they'd missed due to scheduling conflicts. As if 15 years of military service culminating in recognition for leadership and excellence was equivalent to a neighborhood barbecue. I typed and deleted several responses. Explanations of why his absence had hurt. Accusations about misplaced priorities. Questions about what had happened to the man who used to care about my achievements. Instead, I wrote, "No cake." It was a military ceremony, not a party. His response came quickly. "You know what I meant. We're proud of you. Can't wait to hear all about it later." But they weren't proud, not really. Pride required attention, investment, presence. Pride meant showing up even when it was inconvenient, even when something else seemed more exciting, even when duty called you elsewhere. I'd shown them that kind of pride for years. I'd rearranged my military schedule to attend their events. I'd driven hours after training exercises to make school concerts. I'd used leave days to help with Mark's previous ventures. I'd prioritized their needs over my own convenience countless times, because that's what family meant to me. Apparently, it didn't mean the same thing to them. At 3 o'clock, Emma called. "Hey Mom, how was your thing this morning?" "My promotion ceremony?" "Yeah, that. Sorry I couldn't make it. I was just so tired, and Uncle Mark really needed help with setup. But I'm sure it was great." I closed my eyes. "It was important to me, Emma. I know, and I'm really proud of you. Maybe we can celebrate tomorrow? I could take you out to lunch or something." "Tomorrow?" "Well, tonight's Uncle Mark's big opening. We'll probably be out pretty late. But tomorrow we could do something special, just the two of us. Just the two of us after the family had spent all day together supporting Mark. Just the two of us when my moment had passed and theirs had been fully celebrated. Just the two of us as an afterthought." "We'll see," I said. After I hung up, I walked to my bedroom window and looked out at the empty driveway. In a few hours, David and the kids would come home, excited and energized from Mark's opening, full of stories about the party and the people and the success of the evening. They'd expect me to be interested, to share their enthusiasm, to celebrate Mark's achievement as enthusiastically as they had. And maybe, if I was lucky, someone would remember to ask how my ceremony had gone. That's when I realized I wasn't angry, not exactly. Anger would have been easier to manage, more familiar to navigate. Instead, I felt something colder and more permanent settling into place. A clarity I'd been avoiding for months, maybe years. They'd shown me who they were today. More importantly, they'd shown me who I was to them. Now I had to decide what to do with that information. The house stayed empty until almost midnight. I spent the evening reading not military manuals or technical documents, but a novel I'd been meaning to get to for months. I made myself dinner, something I actually wanted to eat instead of something quick and convenient for the family. I took a long bath. I went to bed at my preferred time without waiting for anyone else's schedule. It was the most peaceful evening I'd had at home in years. When I heard the front door open, followed by excited voices and laughter carrying up the stairs, I pretended to be asleep. I listened to them recount the evening's highlights, how many people had come, how impressed everyone was with Mark's vision, how the local newspaper had interviewed him, how several investors had expressed interest in his next venture. "Mom's going to be so sorry she missed it," Emma said. It was incredible. She would have loved meeting Mark's business partners, David added. Really impressive people. Jake chimed in. Uncle Mark said next time he opens a place, he wants us all involved from the beginning. They talked for another 30 minutes, their enthusiasm evident even through the bedroom door. Finally, David came upstairs, moving quietly to avoid waking me. He slipped into bed, and I felt him settle beside me with a contented sigh. "Great night," he whispered, apparently thinking I might be listening. Mark's really done something special. I kept my breathing steady, my body still. But inside, something had crystallized into perfect, cold clarity. Tomorrow, things would be different. Not dramatically, not with big confrontations or ultimatums, but fundamentally. The woman who had rearranged her life around everyone else's priorities was gone. The wife and mother who absorbed disappointment and kept showing up anyway had reached her limit. I'd spent 15 years learning to be an effective leader in the Air Force. Now it was time to apply those skills to my personal life. The conversation started at breakfast, though David didn't realize it was a conversation at first. He came downstairs Saturday morning cheerful and relaxed, talking about how successful Mark's opening had been while he poured coffee and checked his phone for pictures from the party. "You should see the reviews already," he said, scrolling through social media. "Everyone's talking about what a great space it is. Mark's really outdone himself this time." I nodded, buttering toast with deliberate precision. "Sounds like it went well." "It was amazing. I wish you could have been there." "Next time, maybe." He said it casually, as if my absence had been a minor scheduling conflict rather than a conscious choice to prioritize something else over my career milestone. "There won't be a next time," I said. David looked up from his phone. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I won't be available for Mark's future events." "I'll be busy." "Busy with what?" I met his eyes directly. "With people who show up for me." The kitchen went quiet. Emma and Jake, who had been making plans for the day over cereal and orange juice, sensed the shift in atmosphere and looked between their parents uncertainly. "Nicole, come on. You're not seriously upset about yesterday, are you?" "I'm not upset, David. I'm clear." "Clear about what?" "About priorities. Yours, mine, the difference between them." He set his phone down, his expression shifting from casual dismissal to actual attention. "Look, I know we should have been there yesterday, but Mark was having a genuine crisis. The liquor distributor screwed up the delivery, and if we hadn't sorted it out, the whole opening could have been ruined. And if you hadn't sorted it out, Mark would have found another solution. Because that's what adults do when they have problems, they solve them. It's not that simple." He needed support. I needed support too. Emma cleared her throat tentatively. "Mom, we're really sorry we missed your ceremony. But it's not like it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, right? You'll have other promotions." I looked at my daughter, this young woman I'd raised to be thoughtful and considerate, who somehow couldn't understand why her mother might need her family present for one of the most significant moments of her career. "Maybe I will have other promotions, Emma. But you won't be invited to them." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not going to keep asking people to show up for me who have demonstrated they won't." Jake jumped in, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "Mom, you're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. We said we're sorry." "Sorry for what exactly?" He looked confused. "For missing your thing? My promotion ceremony." "Say the words, Jake." "Fine. For missing your promotion ceremony." "And why did you miss it?" "Because Uncle Mark needed help." "And what does that tell you about your priorities?" The question hung in the air. I could see them processing it, realizing for perhaps the first time that their choices revealed something about their values, about how they ranked the important people in their lives. David tried to regain control of the conversation. Nicole, you're being unreasonable. Family means helping each other. Mark needed us yesterday. Family means showing up for each other. I needed you yesterday. It was just bad timing. No, David. It was a choice. Mark announced his party 3 weeks after I told everyone about my ceremony. You chose to prioritize his event over mine. That's not let me finish. My voice stayed calm, but something in my tone made him stop talking. For 15 years, I've rearranged my military schedule to accommodate this family's needs. I've used leave days for your emergencies, switched duty assignments for the kids' events, adjusted my career timeline to support everyone else's goals. They were all listening now, really listening. Yesterday was the first time I asked you to prioritize one of my achievements. Not asked you to sacrifice anything significant, not asked you to choose between competing loyalties. Asked you to spend 2 hours witnessing something I'd worked toward for 15 years. Mom, Emma started. And you chose not to. All of you. You chose to help Mark move furniture instead of watching your wife and mother receive recognition for military service. You made a choice, and that choice told me exactly where I rank in your priorities. David's face was reddening. You're being ridiculous. Of course you're a priority. But Mark's my brother-in-law, and he was in crisis. What kind of family would we be if we didn't help him? The kind of family that shows up for each other's most important moments. It was just one ceremony. Exactly. Just one. And you couldn't do it. I stood up from the breakfast table, carrying my dishes to the sink. So now you know where things stand. When Mark needs help in the future, I'll be unavailable. When any of you have events that conflict with my commitments, I'll make the choice that serves my priorities. You can't be serious, Emma said. You're going to punish us forever because we missed one thing? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm adjusting my expectations to match reality. I turned to face them all, these 3 people I'd centered my life around for 18 years. You've shown me that my achievements aren't worth your time unless they're convenient. That my career doesn't deserve the same respect you show Mark's hobbies. That I'm the person you call when you need something, not the person you support when I need something. That's not true, David said, but his protest sounded weak even to him. Prove it, I said simply. Show up next time. But understand that there might not be a next time if you don't. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them to process what had just happened. But I wasn't finished. This was just the beginning of a much larger conversation about respect, priority, and what family actually meant when the convenient illusions were stripped away. The weekend passed in uncomfortable silence, punctuated by half-hearted attempts at normal conversation. David tried to act as if our breakfast discussion had been an emotional overreaction that would blow over with time. Emma and Jake seemed confused by the sudden shift in household dynamics, unsure how to navigate a version of their mother they'd never encountered before. I spent Saturday afternoon at the base, catching up on administrative work and enjoying the company of colleagues who respected my achievements. When I returned home that evening, the family was watching television together, but the usual easy camaraderie felt strained and artificial. Over the following weeks, I implemented my new approach quietly but consistently. When David asked if I could switch a duty weekend to attend his company's annual picnic, I declined politely. When Emma needed a ride to a friend's party that conflicted with a military family event I wanted to attend, I suggested she find alternative transportation. When Jake asked me to help him with a school project the night before it was due, something I'd always done in the past, dropping my own plans to rescue him from poor planning, I told him he'd have to manage it himself. The changes weren't dramatic or vindictive. I simply stopped being automatically available for their convenience, while they remained unavailable for my priorities. The real test came 3 weeks later when Mark called with another crisis. His business partner had backed out of their next venture, and he needed emotional support and practical advice about moving forward alone. In the past, I would have dropped everything to help him process the disappointment, maybe even offered financial assistance or connections that might help salvage the situation. Instead, I listened politely for 10 minutes, offered brief encouragement, and explained that I had other commitments that evening. But Nicole, I really need to talk through this with someone who understands business challenges, he said. David has an MBA, I replied. And Emma's studying psychology. I'm sure they can provide good perspective. After I hung up, David stared at me with something approaching disbelief. Mark needed you, he said. Mark will figure it out. Adults usually do. When did you become so cold? When I realized being warm and accommodating was a one-way street. That night, David and the kids spent hours on the phone with Mark, offering the support I'd provided for years. I went to bed early, read a book I'd been enjoying, and slept better than I had in months. The shift wasn't just about availability, it was about energy and attention. I'd been scattering myself across everyone else's needs for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to focus on my own goals with full intensity. My squadron commander began assigning me to more challenging projects, recognizing leadership qualities that flourished when I wasn't constantly distracted by family drama. I started saying yes to professional development opportunities I'd previously declined due to family obligations. I joined a military leadership development program that met on weekends. I accepted an invitation to speak at a conference about women in military leadership. I applied for advanced training that would enhance my qualifications for future promotions. For the first time in years, my military career had my complete attention, and the results showed. My performance evaluations reflected a level of engagement and excellence that impressed even seasoned officers who'd watched my steady progression over the years. The family noticed the change, though they struggled to articulate what felt different. I was still present for important events, genuinely important events, not manufactured crises or last-minute requests. I still contributed to household responsibilities and family decisions. But the automatic deference, the reflexive accommodation, the assumption that their needs superseded mine, that had disappeared entirely. 6 weeks after my promotion ceremony, Emma had a genuinely significant event, her acceptance to a competitive summer internship program that could influence her graduate school applications. She'd worked hard for this opportunity, and when she asked if I'd come to the acceptance ceremony and reception, I said yes immediately. But when the ceremony conflicted with one of Mark's networking events, and David suggested we split our time between both, I was clear about my position. I'll be at Emma's ceremony for the entire event, I said. If you want to leave early for Mark's thing, that's your choice. Emma looked between us uncertainly. Mom, you don't have to stay for the whole reception. The important part is just the acceptance announcement. The whole event is important to me because it's important to you, I said. I want to meet your program directors, hear about your summer plans, celebrate this achievement properly. It was a small moment, but David and the kids recognized something fundamental in it. I was showing Emma the kind of complete presence I'd always wanted for my own achievements, presence that wasn't partial, wasn't distracted by competing priorities, wasn't qualified by other obligations. The contrast with how they'd handled my promotion ceremony was unmistakable. That night, after Emma's reception, which David did attend fully, to his credit, she came to my room before bed. Thanks for being there today, Mom. Really being there. Of course. It was important. She sat on the edge of my bed, fidgeting with the program from the ceremony. I've been thinking about what happened with your promotion thing. I mean, ceremony. I waited. I think I understand better now. About showing up. About what it means when someone doesn't. What do you think it means? That you're not their priority. Even if they say you are. I nodded. Actions reveal priorities better than words. I'm sorry I wasn't there for yours. I know you are. Is there a way to make that up to you? I considered the question carefully. Not by trying to redo something that's already happened, but by doing better next time. Will there be a next time? For you? Yes. Because you're thinking about this, asking these questions, trying to understand what went wrong. She smiled tentatively. And for Dad and Jake? That depends on them. Emma hugged me goodnight, and I realized that accountability, real accountability, not just apologies, was the bridge back to trust. She was willing to examine her own behavior, to acknowledge the impact of her choices, to commit to different choices in the future. It was more than David or Jake had offered, and it gave me hope that at least one member of my family understood what needed to change. 3 months after my promotion ceremony, I received news of another significant career opportunity: selection for a prestigious military leadership development program that would require temporary duty at the Pentagon. It was an honor that could accelerate my advancement and open doors to senior leadership positions I'd never imagined possible. The program required a 6-month commitment in Washington, D.C., with occasional weekend returns home. In the past, I might have declined such an opportunity automatically, assuming my family needed me to maintain our established routines and responsibilities. Instead, I accepted immediately. When I announced the news at dinner, the reactions were mixed but revealing. "That's incredible, Mom," Emma said, genuine excitement in her voice. "The Pentagon? That's like the top level of military leadership." Jake looked confused. "Wait, you'll be gone for 6 months?" "I'll be home most weekends," I said. "But yes, essentially." David set down his fork. "When does this start?" 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Nicole, that's not much notice. What about Emma's graduation? What about Jake's baseball season? What about the house, the schedules, everything? I looked at my husband calmly. What about my career? I'm not saying your career isn't important, but this affects the whole family. So did your decision to prioritize Mark's party over my promotion ceremony. But that didn't stop you. The conversation that followed was heated but necessary. David argued that my Pentagon assignment was different because it would disrupt everyone's lives, not just disappoint one person for a few hours. I pointed out that my military career had always required flexibility from the family, but I'd been the only one making sacrifices to accommodate everyone else's needs. "This is what military families do," I said. "We adjust to service requirements. The difference is that now you'll have to do some adjusting instead of just me." Jake was clearly panicked. "But who's going to drive me to practice? Who's going to help with my college applications? Who's going to handle the things I've always handled?" I finished. "Your father will figure it out. Or you will. People are remarkably capable when they have to be." "This feels like punishment," David said. "This feels like opportunity," I replied. "My opportunity, for once." Emma, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "I think Mom should go." Everyone turned to look at her. This is huge for her career. And, honestly, we've all been pretty dependent on her managing everything for us. Maybe it's time we learn to manage things for ourselves. It was the first time anyone in the family had acknowledged the imbalance that had defined our household dynamics for years. Emma's support meant more to me than she probably realized. Over the following weeks, as I prepared for the Pentagon assignment, I watched my family grapple with the reality of functioning without my constant coordination and support. David had to learn the kids' schedules, arrange his own transportation to family events, coordinate household maintenance without my oversight. Jake discovered he was capable of managing his own academic responsibilities when failure wasn't cushioned by my last-minute interventions. Emma stepped up to help with household tasks she'd previously assumed I would handle automatically. The adjustment wasn't seamless, and there were plenty of complaints and requests for me to solve problems remotely that they could have solved themselves. But gradually, they began developing competencies they'd never needed while I was absorbing all the family management responsibilities. Mark noticed the change too. When he called seeking advice about his latest business setback, David had to tell him I was unavailable for lengthy consultation sessions. "What's gotten into Nicole?" Mark asked David during one of these conversations, loud enough for me to hear from the next room. "She's focusing on her own career for once," David replied, and I heard something in his tone, not quite resentment, but not quite pride either. More like bewildered acceptance. 2 weeks before I left for Washington, Emma had a breakthrough moment. She'd been struggling with a research paper and came to me for help, as she'd always done. But instead of sitting down to walk her through the problem, I asked her what specific aspect was challenging her. "I don't know how to structure my argument," she said. "What have you tried?" "Nothing yet. I was hoping you could help me figure it out." "I can point you toward resources, but you need to work through the structure yourself." She looked surprised, almost hurt. "You always help me with papers." "I always wrote parts of your papers," I corrected gently. "There's a difference. But I don't know how to do this alone." "Yes, you do. You just haven't had to prove it to yourself yet." 3 hours later, Emma came back with a detailed outline and a much clearer understanding of her own analytical capabilities. She was proud of the work in a way I'd never seen before, the pride that comes from genuine accomplishment rather than assisted success. "I actually figured it out," she said, almost amazed. "You always could. I just didn't let you." That night, she thanked me for not helping her. It was the first time anyone in my family had recognized that my constant availability might have been enabling their dependence rather than supporting their growth. My last week at home before leaving for the Pentagon was strangely peaceful. The crisis-driven urgency that had characterized our household for years had settled into a more sustainable rhythm. David had learned to plan ahead rather than relying on my ability to solve problems on short notice. The kids had developed organizational skills they'd never needed while I was managing their schedules. Even Mark seemed to understand that I was no longer available as an unpaid consultant for his ventures. He'd started seeking advice from business mentors and professional counselors instead of expecting family members to drop everything for his emotional and logistical needs. On my last evening home, David and I had our most honest conversation in years. "I still think you're overreacting," he said as we sat on our back deck, watching the sunset. "But I understand why you're angry." "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "Anger requires expecting different behavior from people. I don't expect that anymore." "That sounds worse than anger." I considered his observation. "It's more honest. And more peaceful. Do you think we can fix this? Our marriage, I mean." "That depends on whether you want to be married to the person I am now or the person I used to be." He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "What's the difference?" "The person I used to be would have turned down the Pentagon assignment to avoid inconveniencing the family. The person I am now makes decisions based on what's best for my career and my growth, not what's most convenient for everyone else. And if those things conflict, then you'll learn to adapt, just like I adapted for 18 years. David nodded slowly. "I guess that's fair." It wasn't a resolution, exactly, but it was recognition. For the first time in our marriage, we were both acknowledging that my needs mattered as much as everyone else's, even when meeting those needs required other people to adjust their expectations. I left for Washington the next morning with a clear conscience and genuine excitement about the opportunity ahead. My family would be fine without me, better than fine, probably, once they fully developed the independence they'd avoided while I was managing their lives for them. And for the first time in years, I was going somewhere because I wanted to be there, not because someone else needed me to be there. It felt like the beginning of something entirely new. The Pentagon assignment exceeded every expectation I'd harbored about professional fulfillment. Working alongside senior military leaders from all branches, contributing to strategic planning at the highest levels, engaging with complex policy decisions that would affect service members worldwide. It reminded me why I'd chosen the military as a career, not just a job. My colleagues recognized competence quickly in that environment. There was no time for the emotional labor and constant accommodation that had defined my home life. People showed up prepared, met deadlines, honored commitments, and respected each other's expertise. It was refreshing to operate in a space where reliability was expected from everyone, not just extracted from whoever was most willing to provide it. The work was demanding but energizing. I was contributing to initiatives that mattered, solving problems that required my full attention and capabilities. Every day reinforced my decision to prioritize this opportunity over family convenience. My weekend visits home revealed gradual but significant changes in how my family functioned without my constant presence. David had established routines for managing household responsibilities, though he still occasionally called me in Washington to ask where I kept certain items or how I'd previously handled specific situations. "You'll figure it out," became my standard response, and eventually, he stopped asking. Jake was thriving academically in ways that surprised everyone. Without my last-minute interventions, he developed his own systems for managing assignments and deadlines. His grades actually improved once the safety net of my assistance disappeared and he had to rely on his own capabilities. Emma continued to seek my advice, but our conversations had evolved from me providing solutions to me asking questions that helped her find her own answers. She seemed more confident in her decision-making, more willing to tackle challenges independently. The real transformation was in Mark's relationship with the family. Without my availability as a constant source of support and problem-solving, he'd been forced to develop his own network of professional advisors and personal friends. His business ventures became more sustainable when he couldn't rely on family members to absorb the emotional and logistical overflow of his poor planning. 3 months into my Pentagon assignment, Emma called with news that crystallized the changes happening at home. "Dad's going to Mark's investor presentation next week," she said during our regular Sunday phone call. "That's nice," I replied, wondering why this qualified as news. "But he's also coming to my college interview the same day." He figured out how to do both. I felt something shift in my chest, surprise, maybe, or recognition. How? He scheduled them so they wouldn't conflict. He actually planned ahead instead of just assuming one of us would accommodate whatever crisis came up. It was a small thing, but it represented a fundamental change in how David approached competing priorities. Instead of expecting someone else to solve the logistics, he'd taken responsibility for making both events work. "I'm proud of him for that," I said, and meant it. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think you'll come back?" "I mean, really come back, not just physically, but the way you used to be." It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. "I don't think I can be who I used to be, Emma. Too much has changed." "But do you want to be part of the family again?" "I was always part of the family. But I want to be part of a family where everyone contributes equally, where my needs matter as much as everyone else's, where people show up for each other consistently. And if we can prove that's who we are now, then we'll see." 2 weeks later, David surprised me with a visit to Washington. Not a crisis-driven emergency trip, but a planned weekend where he'd arranged childcare, cleared his work schedule, and bought plane tickets in advance. We had dinner at a restaurant near my temporary quarters, and for the first time in years, our conversation focused entirely on my experiences and interests. He asked detailed questions about my Pentagon work, showed genuine curiosity about the projects I was leading, expressed pride in the recognition I was receiving from senior leadership. "I never realized how much you'd accomplished," he said over dessert. "It wasn't hidden. You just weren't paying attention." He nodded, accepting the criticism without defensiveness. "I'm paying attention now." "What changed?" "Having to do everything you used to do. Understanding how much you were managing that I never noticed. Realizing that our family worked because you made it work, not because it was naturally functional." It was the closest thing to genuine accountability I'd heard from him. "And?" I prompted. "And I want to be married to someone I respect as much as I respect you. But I want you to respect me too, which means I need to earn that respect." We talked until midnight, addressing years of accumulated resentment and mismatched expectations. It wasn't a complete resolution. Rebuilding trust would take time and consistent action, but it was the foundation for something healthier than what we'd had before. When David flew back home Sunday evening, I felt cautiously optimistic about the possibility of returning to a family that might actually function as a partnership rather than a support system organized around everyone else's needs. The test would come when I finished my Pentagon assignment and had to decide whether the changes I'd seen were sustainable or just temporary accommodations to my absence. But for the first time in months, I was looking forward to finding out. My Pentagon assignment concluded with commendations from 3 different senior officers and an invitation to apply for permanent positions in strategic planning. The professional validation was gratifying, but more importantly, the 6 months had given me clarity about what I wanted from both my career and my personal life. I returned home to find a family that had genuinely evolved in my absence. David had not only maintained household routines, but had improved several systems I'd established, making them more efficient and equitable. Jake was managing his senior year responsibilities with competence and confidence. Emma was thriving academically and had developed leadership skills I'd never seen when I was constantly available to solve her problems. Most surprisingly, Mark had become a more functional adult. His business ventures were smaller in scope but more realistic in planning. He developed professional relationships that provided the mentorship and support he'd previously sought from family members. When he did ask for help, it was specific assistance with defined boundaries, not open-ended emotional labor. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect, but it was substantial enough to rebuild on. 2 weeks after my return, I received notice of promotion to Chief Master Sergeant, the culmination of 17 years of military service and the highest enlisted rank I could achieve. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday morning, 6 months after the promotion they'd missed. I informed my family with the same matter-of-fact tone I'd used for routine announcements. No special emphasis, no reminders about its importance, no requests for their attendance. "When is it?" David asked. I told him the date and time. "I'll be there," he said simply. "I've already cleared my schedule." Emma looked up from her textbook. "What should I wear?" "I want to look appropriate for a military ceremony." Jake paused his video game. "Can I bring my camera? I want to document this properly." Their responses were immediate, definitive, and unqualified. No mentions of competing priorities, no requests to check other commitments, no assumptions that their attendance was optional. The morning of the ceremony, I woke to find David already dressed in his best suit, Emma reviewing military protocol she'd researched online, and Jake organizing camera equipment. They were treating this event with the seriousness and respect it deserved, the seriousness and respect I deserved. As we drove to the base, Emma asked, "Mom, are you nervous?" "No," I said, and realized it was true. Whether they'd shown up or not, this achievement belonged to me. Their presence would enhance my joy, but their absence wouldn't diminish my pride. That was the difference between this ceremony and the last one. I no longer needed their validation to know my accomplishments mattered. The ceremony itself was everything the previous one should have been. My family sat in the front row, David's eyes bright with obvious pride, Emma taking notes on the proceedings, Jake documenting every moment with careful attention to detail. When my name was called and the Chief Master Sergeant stripes were pinned to my uniform, I looked out at their faces and saw the recognition and respect I'd wanted 6 months earlier. After the formal proceedings, they stayed for the entire reception. David introduced himself to my colleagues with evident pride in my achievements. Emma asked intelligent questions about military leadership and my career progression. Jake took photographs that captured not just the ceremony, but the significance of the moment. Several people commented on how proud my family looked, how engaged they seemed, how obvious their respect for my service was. "They are," I agreed. "Now they are." That evening, we had a family dinner to celebrate, not a hasty meal squeezed between other obligations, but a deliberate celebration planned specifically around my achievement. Mark joined us, bringing congratulations and genuine interest in my new responsibilities. "I'm proud of you, Nicole," he said. "And I'm sorry I missed your last promotion ceremony. I wasn't thinking clearly about priorities." It was an acknowledgement I'd never expected and hadn't realized I needed. As the evening wound down and we shared dessert and stories, I looked around the table at these people I'd chosen to build a life with. They weren't perfect, none of us were, but they'd proven capable of growth, of change, of the kind of accountability that makes relationships sustainable over time. David reached for my hand across the table. "Thank you for not giving up on us," he said. "I didn't give up on us," I replied. "I gave up on accepting less than I deserved." Emma smiled. "There's a difference." "A big difference," Jake added. 6 months later, I accepted a position as senior enlisted advisor to a base commander, a role that utilized both my technical expertise and the leadership skills I developed through 17 years of service. The position required relocating to a new state, but this time, the family decision was made collaboratively. David researched job opportunities in the new location and found a position that excited him professionally. Emma chose a college within driving distance of the new base. Jake embraced the adventure of finishing high school somewhere new. We moved as a family unit that functioned as an actual team, everyone contributing to the logistics, everyone invested in making the transition successful for everyone else, everyone understanding that military life required flexibility and mutual support. The night before we left our old home, I walked through the empty rooms, remembering the person I'd been when we moved in 18 years earlier. That woman had been generous and accommodating, but she'd also been willing to disappear into everyone else's needs and priorities. The woman leaving was generous too, but selectively so. She gave her energy and attention to people who valued and reciprocated those gifts. She showed up for people who showed up for her. She maintained boundaries that protected her ability to be fully present for what mattered most. It had taken a missed ceremony, months of careful distance, and a willingness to rebuild relationships from scratch to get to this point. But standing in that empty house, preparing for the next chapter of both my military career and my family life, I knew the work had been worth it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give people is requiring them to rise to their best selves. Sometimes love means expecting more from each other, not less. And sometimes walking away from how things used to be is the only path toward how things should be. We locked the door and drove toward our new life together, a family that had learned to show up for each other, finally and completely. And that's how missing one ceremony changed the way I show up and who I show up for. What about you? Have you ever realized someone's priorities didn't include you when it mattered most? Did you confront them, or did you quietly pull back? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your experiences. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more true stories, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that their achievements matter.